What if the reason you feel exhausted, unmotivated, and like a shadow of the man you used to be had nothing to do with getting older? What if it wasn't age at all, but 5 specific habits you repeat every single day without even realizing what they're doing to you? Right now, millions of men are walking around with testosterone levels so low that doctors are calling it a silent epidemic. And the symptoms don't announce themselves loudly. They creep in quietly. You start sleeping through the alarm, but still wake up exhausted. Your workouts feel harder, but produce less. Your mood drops for no clear reason. Your drive, in every sense of the word, just fades. And most men do what men do. They push through. They blame stress. They tell themselves, this is just what getting older feels like. But here is what science is now telling us. A landmark study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that testosterone levels in men have been declining by approximately 1% every year since the 1980s, meaning today's 40-year-old man has significantly lower testosterone than a 40-year-old man in 1990, even at the same age, the same weight, the same health status. This is not just a natural aging story. Something in modern life is actively suppressing testosterone in men across all age groups. And a 2021 study, published in Frontiers in Endocrinology, identified specific lifestyle behaviors, things men do routinely, daily, without a second thought, as primary drivers of this decline. Not disease, not genetics, habits. In this video, we are going to reveal the 5 habits that are quietly and systematically destroying your testosterone, ranked from significant to most dangerous. Stay with me through all 5, because number 1 is not what most men expect. It is the habit almost every health channel overlooks, and research now links it directly to testosterone suppression so severe it mirrors the hormonal profile of men 20 years older. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to look for in your own daily life and what to do about it before the damage becomes much harder to reverse. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We read every single one and reply. Now let's get into it. Habit number 5. Sedentary lifestyle. The silent testosterone killer hidden in your chair. Let me paint a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You wake up. You sit at the breakfast table. You drive to work, sitting. You spend 6 to 8 hours at a desk, sitting. You drive home, sitting. You eat dinner. You sit on the couch. You watch television for 2 hours. You go to bed. That is a perfectly normal day for the majority of men in the modern world, and it is a hormonal disaster. Here is why inactivity hits testosterone so hard. Your body produces testosterone in the Leydig cells of the testes, and the signal to produce it comes largely from the pituitary gland in the brain via a hormone called luteinizing hormone, or LH. This entire signaling system is exquisitely sensitive to physical demand. When your body is physically active, when muscles are contracting, when you are lifting, pushing, moving with intensity, the brain reads that signal and ramps up testosterone production in response. The body essentially reasons, this man needs strength, power, and recovery resources. Make more testosterone. When your body is sedentary for most of the day, the brain receives the opposite signal. There is no physical demand. There is no need for increased strength or recovery. Testosterone production quietly dials down. A study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology found that men who sat for more than 8 hours per day had significantly lower total and free testosterone levels compared to men who sat for fewer than 4 hours, even after controlling for weight, age, and other lifestyle factors. Sitting time alone was an independent predictor of testosterone suppression. But inactivity damages testosterone through a second, less obvious pathway as well. Prolonged sitting, especially with poor posture, has been shown to raise cortisol. And cortisol is testosterone's direct hormonal enemy. The two hormones are produced from the same precursor compound, pregnenolone. When cortisol demand increases, your body diverts that raw material toward cortisol production and away from testosterone. Scientists call this the cortisol-testosterone seesaw. When one goes up, the other comes down. We had a patient, a 44-year-old software developer named Marcus, who came to us with what he described as a complete loss of his former self. He had been athletic in his 20s and early 30s, but a demanding remote work job had turned him almost entirely sedentary. He was averaging fewer than 2,000 steps per day. His testosterone had dropped to levels we typically associate with men in their late 60s. He was not overweight. He was not drinking heavily. He simply had stopped moving. We gave Marcus one instruction for the first month. Not a gym program, not a diet, just this. Break up every hour of sitting with 5 minutes of movement. Walking, body weight squats, anything that engaged his muscles. Within 8 weeks, his testosterone had measurably increased. By month 3, he described feeling like himself again for the first time in years. Now, here is the crucial nuance. Not all exercise helps testosterone equally. Resistance training, lifting weights, body weight exercises, anything that creates muscular demand against resistance produces the strongest testosterone response. Chronic endurance training, like running 10 miles every day, can actually suppress testosterone over time by raising cortisol chronically. The sweet spot for testosterone is 3 to 5 sessions per week of compound resistance movements, squats, deadlifts, rows, presses, combined with regular daily movement throughout the day. If you spend most of your day in a chair, your body is not getting the hormonal signal it needs to maintain healthy testosterone levels. Movement is not optional. It is the biological trigger that tells your body to keep producing the hormone that makes you feel like a man. Habit number 4. Heavy alcohol consumption. The weekend habit that's castrating your hormones. Most men know alcohol is not exactly a health food. But what they do not know, what almost nobody talks about clearly, is the specific, deeply damaging relationship between alcohol and testosterone. And I am not talking about chronic alcoholism. I am talking about the pattern that describes millions of otherwise healthy men. A few drinks on weeknights, a heavier session on Friday, a few beers watching the game on Sunday. What most people would call normal social drinking. That pattern is doing serious damage to your testosterone. Here is how. When you consume alcohol, your liver prioritizes metabolizing it above almost all other functions. This matters for testosterone because the liver is responsible for clearing excess estrogen from your bloodstream. Estrogen and testosterone exist in balance in the male body. Too much estrogen drives testosterone down. When the liver is occupied processing alcohol, estrogen clearance slows. Estrogen accumulates, and testosterone levels fall in response. But it goes further. Alcohol directly toxic to the Leydig cells, the cells in the testes that actually manufacture testosterone. A study published in Alcohol and Alcoholism found that even moderate alcohol intake, defined as 5 or more drinks over a 2-day period, reduced testosterone levels in healthy young men by up to 23% within 24 hours. Not in alcoholics. In healthy young men having what most would consider a normal weekend. A 23% drop in testosterone from a single weekend. Let that register. The longer-term picture is even more concerning. A study published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs found that men who consumed more than 14 drinks per week, which is roughly 2 drinks per day, had testosterone levels averaging 14% lower than non-drinkers, with significantly elevated estrogen levels. They also had measurably reduced testicular volume and lower sperm quality. And there is a third mechanism. Alcohol disrupts deep sleep, specifically REM and slow-wave sleep, which is the stage during which the majority of daily testosterone production occurs. We will return to this when we reach the number 1 habit, because the sleep-testosterone connection is the most important and least understood relationship in male hormonal health. One of our patients, a 51-year-old named Daniel, came to us convinced his testosterone decline was purely age-related. His levels were low, but not catastrophically so. He felt flat, unmotivated, and noticed his body composition changing, losing muscle despite going to the gym, gaining fat, especially around his chest and abdomen. He was drinking what he considered modestly, 2 beers most evenings, more on weekends. We asked him to eliminate alcohol entirely for 60 days. Nothing else changed. No new exercise, no dietary overhaul, just no alcohol. At the 60-day mark, his testosterone had risen 19%. His mood had improved markedly. The chest and belly fat, which had been driven substantially by elevated estrogen, had reduced visibly. He stood in our office looking genuinely surprised. He said, "I thought a couple of beers was nothing. It is not nothing. Not for your hormones. This does not mean you can never drink again. But if your testosterone is low, or if you are experiencing the symptoms associated with low testosterone, fatigue, low drive, mood changes, muscle loss, fat gain, alcohol is not a neutral variable. It is an active suppressor. And for many men, reducing or eliminating it is one of the fastest routes to hormonal recovery available." Habit number 3. Chronic stress. The invisible hormonal siege that never stops. If I asked you right now whether you are stressed, you might say yes, but probably shrug and add that everyone is stressed. It is just life. It is normal. And that normalization is exactly what makes chronic stress one of the most devastating testosterone killers in the modern world. Here is the biology you need to understand. When you encounter a stressor, any stressor, whether a genuine physical threat or an email from your boss, your adrenal glands release cortisol. Cortisol is your survival hormone. It sharpens your focus, mobilizes energy reserves, and prepares your body to respond. For short bursts, it is enormously useful. But chronic stress, the relentless, low-grade, never fully resolved pressure of modern life, means cortisol never fully switches off. It sits elevated day after day, week after week. And as we discussed earlier, cortisol and testosterone share the same biochemical precursor. When cortisol demand is chronically high, your body prioritizes cortisol production, and testosterone suffers directly. This is not a theory. The evidence is overwhelming. A study published in Hormones and Behavior found a direct, dose-dependent inverse relationship between cortisol and testosterone. The higher the cortisol, the lower the testosterone, consistently across thousands of subjects. Another study in psychoneuroendocrinology found that men with chronically elevated cortisol from work-related stress had testosterone levels averaging 21% lower than men of comparable age and health with normal stress levels. But stress does something beyond the direct cortisol-testosterone trade-off. It suppresses the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH, from the hypothalamus. GnRH is the master signal that triggers the entire testosterone production cascade. When the brain is under chronic stress, it reads the body's state as an emergency, and reproduction and hormonal vitality are deprioritized. In evolutionary terms, this makes sense. If a lion is chasing you, this is not the moment to maintain peak testosterone. The problem is that modern stress never resolves. The lion never leaves, and your body responds as though it never does either. We had a patient named Trevor, a 38-year-old entrepreneur with a business under severe financial pressure. He was training hard, eating well, not drinking excessively. By every traditional measure, his lifestyle should have supported healthy testosterone. But his levels were those of a man in his late 50s. He was exhausted despite sleeping 7 hours. He had lost the competitive edge that had defined him. His relationship was suffering. He told us quietly that he no longer felt like himself in any meaningful way. His cortisol levels, when we tested them, were consistently elevated throughout the day. The stress was running on a biological loop, depressing his entire hormonal system. We worked with Trevor not on adding more habits, but on interrupting the stress response itself. Structured breathing protocols, deliberate recovery periods, and boundaries around work hours that gave his nervous system genuine rest. Within 10 weeks, his cortisol pattern had normalized. His testosterone followed. He described the change as not just physical, but as having climbed out of a dark room he had forgotten he was in. Chronic stress is not just a mood problem or a lifestyle inconvenience. It is a direct, measurable, physiological assault on your hormonal health. And for many men, addressing stress is the single most powerful lever available for testosterone recovery, more impactful than any supplement on the market. Habit number 2: excess body fat, especially belly fat. The hormonal trap hiding under your shirt. Of all the habits on this list, excess body fat, particularly visceral fat accumulated around the abdomen, is the one with the most complex and self-reinforcing relationship with testosterone. Because it does not just suppress testosterone, it creates a vicious biological cycle that actively converts your testosterone into estrogen, making recovery progressively harder the longer it goes unaddressed. Here is the mechanism that changes everything when you understand it. Fat tissue, particularly visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that surrounds your organs, contains high concentrations of an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone into estrogen. The more visceral fat you carry, the more aromatase activity you have, and the more your testosterone is continuously being converted into estrogen in real time. The consequence is a hormonal environment that is self-worsening. Low testosterone promotes fat accumulation, especially around the belly. More belly fat means more aromatase activity. More aromatase means more testosterone converted to estrogen. Lower testosterone, more belly fat. The cycle tightens and compounds. A study published in Obesity found that men with a waist circumference above 40 inches had testosterone levels averaging 30% lower than lean men of the same age. A separate study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that a 10% increase in body mass index was associated with a 14% reduction in total testosterone, and that visceral fat was a significantly stronger predictor of low testosterone than overall body weight. But here is what makes this particularly insidious for the men watching this. You do not need to be clinically obese to be affected. A man at a perfectly normal BMI who carries excess visceral fat, the kind that accumulates with years of refined carbohydrates, alcohol, inactivity, and stress, can have testosterone levels indistinguishable from someone significantly obese, because it is not total fat, but visceral, aromatase-rich fat that determines the hormonal impact. The elevated estrogen resulting from this cycle produces symptoms that many men find deeply unsettling: growth of breast tissue, reduced body hair, emotional sensitivity, loss of the competitive drive that testosterone supports. And because estrogen also feeds back to the brain and suppresses the pituitary gland's LH release, the entire testosterone production system gets throttled at its source. One of our patients, a 47-year-old named Stephen, came to us after his doctor casually mentioned his testosterone was a little low and suggested he might want to consider testosterone replacement therapy. Stephen was not dramatically overweight. He had a noticeable belly but would not have turned heads at the beach. His BMI was 27, technically just overweight. But his waist measurement was 42 inches. His estrogen was elevated. His LH was suppressed. His aromatase activity was effectively pulling testosterone out of his bloodstream and converting it as fast as his body could make it. We worked with Stephen on targeted visceral fat reduction, not extreme dieting, but a consistent caloric deficit combined with the resistance training protocol we discussed in Habit 5, which has been shown to preferentially reduce visceral fat compared to cardio. Over 6 months, he lost 4 inches from his waist. His testosterone rose 34%. His estrogen normalized without any medication. His doctor, at the 6-month follow-up, removed the testosterone replacement therapy discussion from the table entirely. The belly is not just a cosmetic issue. It is an active hormonal saboteur. And reducing it, specifically, strategically, with the right combination of dietary discipline and resistance training, is one of the most powerful things you can do to reclaim your testosterone. Habit number 1. Sleep deprivation. The number 1 testosterone killer almost nobody is talking about. Here we are, the habit at the top of this list, the one that is more widespread, more damaging, and more consistently overlooked than any other testosterone threat in a man's daily life. Sleep deprivation. And before you think, I sleep fine, this one is not about me, I want you to read the numbers carefully. Because the research is unambiguous and the threshold is far stricter than most men realize. The majority of testosterone production in men occurs during sleep. Specifically, testosterone is synthesized in concentrated pulses during slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, the deepest, most restorative stages of the sleep cycle. Blood testosterone levels peak in the early morning, right as you are waking up from a full night of deep sleep. That morning peak is not incidental. It is the result of 6 to 8 hours of the body's internal factory running at full capacity. When you cut that process short, by sleeping fewer than 6 hours, by sleeping poorly, by waking frequently, by going to bed at 2 a.m., you are not just missing rest. You are shutting down the primary manufacturing window for your most important male hormone. A landmark study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the most rigorous studies ever conducted on sleep and testosterone, took young, healthy men between the ages of 22 and 32 and restricted their sleep to 5 hours per night for just 1 week. 1 week. These were not sedentary, overweight, or unhealthy men. They were young and physically fit. After just 7 nights of restricted sleep, their daytime testosterone levels had dropped by an average of 15%. The researchers noted that this rate of decline was equivalent to aging 10 to 15 years in a single week. 10 to 15 years of testosterone aging in 1 week of poor sleep. That number should stop every man reading this in his tracks. But the damage does not stop there. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, adding the stress-driven testosterone suppression we discussed in Habit 3 on top of the direct production deficit. Poor sleep increases appetite, particularly for refined carbohydrates and high-calorie foods, driving the visceral fat accumulation we covered in Habit 2. Poor sleep reduces motivation to exercise, compounding the inactivity problem from Habit 5. And poor sleep disrupts growth hormone secretion, which works in concert with testosterone to support muscle maintenance and recovery. Sleep deprivation does not just suppress testosterone in isolation, it activates every other mechanism on this list simultaneously. It is the habit that makes all the other habits worse. A 2019 study in Sleep Medicine Reviews found that men with obstructive sleep apnea, a condition affecting an estimated 1 in 4 men over 30, the majority of whom are undiagnosed, had testosterone levels averaging 17% lower than men without sleep apnea of identical age and weight. The intermittent oxygen deprivation during apnea episodes directly interrupts the testosterone synthesis pulses that occur during deep sleep, fragmenting the production cycle night after night, year after year. One of my most striking patients was a 52-year-old named Frank. On paper, Frank was doing most things right. He exercised 4 times a week. He ate a mostly clean diet. He drank only occasionally. His stress levels were manageable. And yet, his testosterone was lower than many sedentary, overweight men half a decade older than him. He had been dismissing his fatigue and flat mood for years, chalking it up to the inevitable wear of middle age. When we went through his sleep in detail, the picture emerged quickly. Frank was sleeping 5 to 5.5 hours on weeknights. He told me he wore his short sleep like a badge of honor, the sign of a busy, productive man. He had done this for the better part of a decade. We introduced a single intervention, a non-negotiable sleep window of 7.5 to 8 hours per night. No screens after 10 p.m. A consistent wake time. A dark, cool room. Nothing exotic. Within 4 weeks, his testosterone had increased measurably. Within 3 months, it had risen 28% from baseline. His wife later called us, something patients' spouses rarely do, to say that the man she had been missing had returned. Frank's sleep had been slowly, silently dismantling his hormonal health for 10 years. One change, just sleep, began rebuilding it in weeks. Here is what the research tells us is the minimum viable sleep for testosterone maintenance. 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night with a consistent bedtime, in a room that is dark and cool, with no alcohol within 3 hours of sleep and no bright screens within an hour of bedtime. These are not luxuries. They are the basic conditions under which your body can actually do the hormonal work it is designed to do. If you are sleeping 6 hours and wondering why your testosterone is low, you now have your answer. The factory is not getting enough time to run. Putting it all together. The pattern you cannot ignore. Now step back for a moment and look at these 5 habits as a system rather than 5 isolated problems. A man who sleeps poorly has elevated cortisol. Elevated cortisol drives fat accumulation, particularly visceral fat. Visceral fat converts testosterone to estrogen via aromatase. Low testosterone and elevated estrogen reduce motivation to exercise. Physical inactivity lowers testosterone further. Fatigue and mood disruption drive alcohol consumption for relief. Alcohol further disrupts sleep, and the cycle tightens. This is not a list of unrelated habits. It is a self-reinforcing hormonal spiral that millions of men are caught in right now. And it starts most commonly with the top of this list, with insufficient, low-quality sleep. The entry point for breaking the spiral is different for every man. But the most impactful single change for the greatest number of men is sleep. Fix sleep first. Everything else becomes easier when the foundational hormonal production window is protected. After sleep, address chronic stress, not through willpower, but through building genuine physiological recovery into your daily schedule. Slow breathing, physical rest, boundaries. Then attack visceral fat with resistance training and a consistent, modest caloric deficit. Reduce alcohol to fewer than 7 drinks per week at minimum, or eliminate it entirely if your levels are significantly suppressed. And move your body every single day, with intention and resistance, not just a passive walk. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires an expensive supplement. All of it is within your control, starting today. If you have made it to this point in the video, I want you to hear something directly. The fatigue you have been feeling is not weakness. The flat mood is not a character flaw. The loss of drive, the changing body, the sense that you are operating at a fraction of your former capacity, that is not who you are. That is what happens to a man whose hormonal system has been quietly compromised by habits that modern life makes almost invisible. And here is what matters most. You can change this. I have watched men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s reclaim testosterone levels and the vitality that comes with them. Not through injections or prescriptions, but through these 5 targeted behavioral changes. Sleep, stress, belly fat, alcohol, movement. These are the levers, and they are yours to pull. You do not need to overhaul everything at once. Start with 1. If your sleep is poor, that is the place to begin. Give yourself 4 weeks of protected, prioritized sleep and pay attention to what shifts. You may be surprised how much changes from that single decision alone. Because the research is clear. These hormonal changes are not inevitable. They are largely behavioral. And behavioral means reversible. I want to hear from you now. Which of these 5 habits hit closest to home? Which one are you going to tackle first? Leave it in the comments. Be honest with yourself and with us, because the conversation in the comments of videos like this is where real change begins. You might write something that helps another man recognize himself and take action. If this video gave you clarity, gave you a starting point, or gave you hope that this situation is changeable, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs it. A friend who has been complaining of low energy. A brother who seems like a different man than he used to be. A partner who deserves to understand what might be happening. Subscribe for more videos like this, because understanding your biology is the first step toward taking it back. This is Dr. James Porter. Take care of your sleep. Take care of your stress. Take care of your body. And above all, don't accept decline as your destiny. Thanks for watching.